So I've been playing Last Epoch since 1.0, and by some miracle I've gotten past enough loading screens to see most of the content. The launch went about as well as you'd expect from any live service launch in 2024, and that it fucking sucked. If you were lucky enough to get into the game like I did on release, it wouldn't be long before the Last Epoch servers suffered a severe case of brain trauma, symptoms including perpetually running into a fucking door. Basically, the launch was a steaming pile of ass as per 2024 launches. Maybe one of these days developers will figure out how to launch a game, but I'm going to try to put all of that aside and focus on the game itself, as these issues should resolve themselves over time. It is worth noting, if you're so inclined, you can play the game in full offline and not wait in the Last Epoch drive-thru line at least. One last thing I need to mention before we start talking about the actual video game is the fact that this shit is less than half the price of Diablo 4, which in this economy, kinda crazy. On top of that, thankfully the devs realized making their game pay to play and having gameplay impacting MTX was a bad idea, so the only things you can buy are cosmetics. That's right, no stash tabs. I'm looking at you, GGG. And if you're worried you can't get more stash tabs, don't worry, you can buy them with in-game gold. Imagine that. Alright, it's finally time to talk about the video game. Talk video game? Yeah. With 5 base classes and 3 mastery choices for each, there is a shit ton of choice in Last Epoch. Each class has access to the base passive tree and skills for that class, the entire passive tree and skill set for your chosen mastery, and half the passive tree and skills for the other masteries. This lets you do some crazy shit with mixing and matching all the different passives and skills on all the different trees. Overall, I'd say it offers enough customization without being too confusing like Path of Exile. I personally chose the Rogue for my first character and went into the Falconer Mastery. The build I went for basically scaled the skills Umbral Blades and Puncture to the stratosphere and used Aerial Assault and Net Traps to trigger each of them respectively. It made for an extremely satisfying combo where I was running around Swifty one-shot macroing every rare and boss I saw. Overall, Buildcraft in Last Epoch hits this solid middle ground between the simplicity of D4 and the complexity of PoE, where you're catered to whether you want to follow a build guide or go at your own pace and create your own unique builds. I should also mention that respeccing in this game is super easy. The only thing you're locked into is your mastery choice, and despite it seeming a little punishing in the early game when you lose skill levels to respec, your minimum skill level will get raised, as well as increased XP to catch up to your other skills. The campaign in Last Epoch is serviceable, I guess. Might be a bit more interesting if you paid a little bit more attention to the story. Hot take, but stories in ARPGs, they're cool, but I'd rather watch it in a YouTube video while I'm actually playing the video game. It was pretty fun on my first and my second time through, but by the third, maybe fourth, I don't know how I'm gonna feel about it. Since it was my second time through the campaign, I knew where to go, what side quests to do and whatnot, which helped speed it up and made the pace of the campaign pretty enjoyable. Thankfully, the game does offer these alternate leveling paths, which are explained as exits from the dungeons. They basically keep you from doing this on your first playthrough by the fact that you won't have a key to get into the dungeon on your first character. So get fucked, I guess. On the note of the campaign, I guess this game does have a story. The gist of it is that there's this artifact called the Epoch that facilitates time travel and blah 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 blah. The cool thing about it is that the areas and bosses you fight in the campaign rear their heads up again in the end game, but with extra mechanics and difficulty. Other than that, I still don't know anything about the story, so best I move on. In Last Epoch, they've taken the traditional solo self-found system and trade and made it into an actually impactful choice. In the last act of the campaign, you'll be able to choose your faction between the trade and the self-found factions. This will either give you the ability to buy and sell items with other players of the trade faction on an auction house, or give you increased drop rates and insane bonuses like dropping an entire set when you'd otherwise drop one item. I personally started with the trade faction wanting to be the Jeff Bezos of Last Epoch, but between the absolutely deep-fried servers, 2 loading screens required to even go to the auction house, and the absolute dog shit design of it, I decided to change to the self-found faction to find more items. And turns out there's a lot more depth to the self-found faction than the trade one. On top of all the absolutely broken bonuses you get with the self-found faction, you get access to prophecies. Probably my favorite part about the Last Epoch endgame and gearing. Prophecies are ways you can guarantee certain types of drops and from certain types of content, and can even be customized to your playstyle by removing content types with these items you buy from the vendor. I absolutely adore the idea of this system where you can choose between trade and solo self-found, but unfortunately it could have used some more time in the proverbial oven, with the trade faction seeming so lackluster and lacking so much content, especially when compared with the self-found faction. Crafting in Last Epoch is fucking elite. The way it works supports the player in turning all those almost great items into something actually usable, facilitating small upgrades through every step of the endgame, which is insanely satisfying. If you find yourself with an item with only 3 mods on it, bam, you can directly apply whatever mod you'd like to that empty slot, provided that mod matches the open slot, e.g. it's a suffix or prefix, and you have the appropriate shard for the craft. You've also got glyphs and runes in Last Epoch, which you can use to do things like upgrade and reroll stats that you don't want off of your gear, or use runes of removal to randomly remove an affix, and so much more. There's plenty to the system allowing you to make some really cool shit, but without turning crafting into a full-time job requiring a master's degree. And this is all without touching on the legendary potential system, the Weaver's Will system, or how all of this ties into the end game at all. It's honestly insane. Whilst on the topic of loot, I should mention the game has an inbuilt loot filter. It's fully customizable in game, and you can tweak it to show only the items that are relevant to your build, or if you're playing on trade, anything of value as well, which is an absolute godsend if you've ever played any other ARPGs. You can even import one straight from the internet and avoid the hassle of making one yourself. Idle slots are a unique mechanic to Last Epoch, but their inspiration is pretty clearly taken from Charms in Diablo 2. You get this idle section in your inventory that will slowly open up slots over the course of the campaign, and as you complete side quests. These idols are mostly a great way to fix any gaps in your build and are seemingly pretty minor, but there are definitely some cool idols, and even I think at least one unique one. The endgame's broken up into 2 main activities, monoliths and dungeons. Monoliths are a series of maps that you'll clear out to increase the timeline stability bar. As the bar increases and hits certain thresholds, you'll unlock quest echoes for that monolith. And once you reach the 3rd and final quest echo, you get to fight a boss specific to the monolith, and these fights go fucking crazy. Upon completing the boss, you'll be able to choose from one of 3 randomized blessings that give you permanent upgrades, and later on you'll be able to choose from one of 5. These buffs can range from things like increased drop rates of specific item types to flat stat increases such as elemental res or damage. This kind of encourages you to go back and farm the monoliths on the higher difficulties where you have more options so you can get those perfect blessings. Once you complete the 10 base monoliths, you'll be able to go back and do them again. Fun. These new monoliths though are empowered and corrupted. This increases the base level to 100, as well as introduces new affixes with the corruptions that you get as you go further into the monolith. Overall, I'd say the system about 80% of the time is really fun to interface with, but becomes a massive drag when you're running circles around an empty map for that last percent of stability. Dungeons, on the other hand, are probably the most fun I've had playing the game. At the time of release, there is 4 dungeons in Last Epoch, including the arena. Each of the dungeons can be completed at 4 different tiers, increasing the level of the mobs and introducing a fuck ton of new rewards. And each of them also comes with their own unique area ability. The Temporal Sanctum dungeon has a time shift ability that lets you switch between the Ruined and the Divine era, I think. Basically, it'll let you navigate through blocked doorways and avoid one-shot mechanics in the boss fight. I won't spoil the rest of the dungeon mechanics, but they are really cool and interactive, and yeah, very fun. There's also a whole separate arena mode, which I haven't had a chance to try yet. Not to mention, all these systems are supported by the Prophecy system I mentioned earlier, allowing you to tailor these insane loot explosions of the exact type of items you want. The game's an actual dopamine printer. Despite the rocky launch, I think Last Epoch has more than the foundations of an amazing ARPG. And with the cycle system acting as Last Epoch's seasonal content thing, I'm pretty certain this game is just going to get even more shit to do. With so much to do in the end game already, I'm pretty sure you'll sink at least 50 to 100 hours getting your first character completely geared up, let alone getting started on your second. And with the future cycle updates not coming as paid DLC, Last Epoch seems to be offering a pretty good value for money. Anyway, I think that's enough from me for now. I gotta go clear some more monoliths and decide what game I'm gonna review next. If you like the video, subscribe, follow my Twitch. Bye.